Thanks for staying with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. In the face of mounting humanitarian, economic, and social challenges, Nigeria is adopting a multifaceted and resilient approach to address these pressing issues. As the country grapples with the impact of climate change, economic instability, and social unrest, a blend of policy innovation and community engagement is emerging as a beacon of hope. The Nigerian government, alongside international partners, is prioritizing sustainable development and economic diversification to mitigate the effects of global economic fluctuations. Initiatives aimed at boosting local industries, enhancing agricultural productivity, and fostering technological innovation are at the forefront of this effort. With a focus on renewable energy and digital transformation, Nigeria seeks to create new job opportunities and stabilize its economy. Just this week, the European Union announced the provision of €1.1 million in humanitarian aid to assist flood victims in Nigeria. The fund is part of a €5.4 million aid package to support victims of flooding in Nigeria and 5 other countries across the Sahel and Chad regions. According to the EU, more than 4.4 million have been affected by the flood in the 6 countries, which has led to the destruction of public infrastructure, water, and health facilities. Joining us now from Owerri, the Imo State capital, is Dr. Chinedu Anyanwu, a development strategist, for a chat on preventive strategies which Nigeria can adopt in the face of these and other humanitarian crises. Good morning, Dr. Anyanwu. Good to have you join us on the morning show today.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. All right, let's talk about the things that are needed at a time like this that so many humanitarian challenges are confronting our nation, like a few other countries in West Africa, as we have read out in the introduction. Floods everywhere, warnings from the federal government that these things will not cease at this time. It will continue. There have been support here and there from international partners. But what do you think that should be the focus of the government, of the civil society, and not just the federal government? I'm also talking in terms of state governments and local government to ensure that the humanitarian crisis that we are facing in a few areas are adequately addressed.
Okay. First of all, let me start by saying it requires collaboration across the board. And basically what I mean by that is we're talking of 1.1 million euros. On face value, that sounds like a lot. But when you dig in deeper, you find out that Nigeria is faced with flooding, and this has had a cumulative effect. From 2020 up till date, World Bank estimates an average cost of about $6.5 billion in order to remedy the situation on ground. So when you look at the 1.1 million euros, it cannot function in isolation. It's commendable, but it's really not sustainable. So we're talking about 4.4 million people who have been affected, 1.4 million people displaced, a lot of deaths. We need to shift from curative to preventive. We're talking about we're talking about the flooding and the implications. We have agencies, government agencies that are responsible to take care of these things. We have the hydrological agency. We have the emergency agency as well. We have the Ministry for Water Resources and the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. What are we doing to prevent these things from happening? The lockdown is being released intermittently over a period of time, and we're being advised. So, in essence, if we look at it from a position of incremental funding, we'll keep having this problem, and there's no solution to it. The way forward is actually systemic reform. We need to look at internally, how can we now invest in infrastructure to help us mitigate these things from happening. We need to look at, we're talking about the aid. One of the main issues with the aid is also the disbursement of the aids. What are we doing about the administrative bureaucracy? So, face value, it sounds so good, but if we want to be real to ourselves, we need to start being functional. We're having issues with lax environmental laws. We're having issues with construction on the waterways, which is causing blockages. So yes, Cameroon will have to release the dam, especially during the rainy season, so they're not over-flooded. But we also need to improve on our bilateral communications with them. There's so much that can be done that is yet to be done. And so I think and I believe that's the way to go. Preventive and not curative. So that will save a lot of money, that will save a lot of lives, and that, will help people not lose their properties, because we're not just talking about government infrastructure being destroyed, we're talking about personal properties as well. We're talking about loss of lives. So the way to go is funding in terms of, being resilient in our approach and in technical equipment that we acquire. The way to go is also in ensuring credible, transparent disbursement of these aids. You're not going to have a good chunk going on consultancy fees and logistics, and you claim that most of the money has gone to those in need. It doesn't solve the problem. So when I say it requires collaboration, it requires government, it also requires citizens, it requires people across board. So that's what I think.
Rightfully so, looking at the EU providing about 1.1 million euros to aid and assist flood victims, while international aid in itself is essential, how much further can Nigeria leverage such partnerships to build local capacity and reduce dependence on external assistance in the long term? Nigeria is part of several international agreements aimed at addressing humanitarian crises. But in your opinion, what preventive frameworks or policies should the current administration adopt to better integrate these agreements into local strategies for disaster preparedness and response, so we're better prepared next time? Go ahead, please.
So one other thing I think we need to do is we need to look into the role of the NGOs, because it requires collaboration. The government cannot do everything. We're talking about Nigerian population of over 200 million. And then we have women composing of 50.3% of that 200 million. An interesting aspect to that is the fact that of those 50.3% that make up women, you have about 39% that are classified by the World Health Organization as reproductive age, which means that segment of the population is still growing and evolving. We need to include them in terms of what is going on in the country. Our emphasis has been so much on oil. I don't think we can say this, I don't think this fact can be overstated. We need to start investing in other areas, in terms of agriculture, in terms of services, in terms of production. And then when we're talking about policy reforms, I also think a big issue has to do with implementing the present ones. So when we're not making a case for women, we're saying women added into the equation will help reduce the burden. When you educate them, when you equip them with funding, and also provide an enabling environment, they, in addition to the men, increase the employment rate, and then we now diversify into other sectors of the economy. So when we're talking about democracy, what makes a country democratically viable? Economically, politically, we have to be sustainable. Foreign aid will not give us that solution. So government needs to look into it. Another critical aspect is the fact that when we're talking about government is being broken down to the grassroots. If you talked about state government, what can they do? First of all, we have three, let me use Imo State as an example. We have 3 senatorial seats. We have 10 federal member seats. We have 27 House members. All of them have constituencies that come under them. If they want to use the allocation that comes to them for their constituency, they cannot make it a partisan event. It has to be something that includes all the people under their constituency. A very credible way to ensure that, there's skilled training, there's education going on, there's disbursement of resources. A very good way to ensure that is working with the NGOs who already have credible data or statistics to show that this is the work they already do. For instance, I run an NGO, NwanyiBuihe Foundation, and what we actually do is we reach out to rural widows and disadvantaged youths. We've been on for some years now, but I can tell you that 98% of the funding has been coming from us, is internally generated. If we have collaboration with government agencies, it will go a long way in terms of our reach and our scope. So again, I can't, overstate this fact that we really need to collaborate. And then when we're talking about government, the presidency, the governors, they can't do it all alone. These federal and state house members also need to come up to work with NGOs. And at the end of the day, there can be a spread. I mean, let's not forget that everybody is not in it. A lot of people are, yes. Because somebody can say, oh, will the government allocation be able to cater to everybody under a constituency? Well, probably not. But guess what? It is going to make a solid impact. And that's what governance is about. Reaching out, especially to the unreached and the grassroots.
I think the key thing here as well is enhancing resilience to be able to deal with these humanitarian issues. Resilience is so key when we're looking at the future of Nigeria, how we respond. What lessons do you think Nigeria can learn from previous humanitarian efforts with regards to enhancing resilience that we can adopt when we have these problems coming up to handle them better?
Well, like I said earlier on, we need to adopt a preventive approach. Maybe part of it is also politically inclined. We need to be transparent. We need to ensure that we put the right people in the right positions. With the absence of nepotism, then we start talking about competence, we start talking about character. And so you now have people that actually have the burden to see that there is change and to see that whatever resources comes from the government is also utilized for what it's meant for. And when we're talking about mitigating these things in the future, there's really nothing that happens to Nigeria that has not happened other places. I think we need to do some type of comparisons. How did other countries like Singapore evolve? How is Malaysia doing this? The Asian continent, actually. I mean, we're talking about funding from the US, from the European countries. How are they doing what they do? Because they also face these things. So it's also something we need to look into in terms of building more competence, building more skilled training, and then having the value system to sustain it. Then when these resources actually come, for them to be utilized, and especially not making it a party affair, but a societal issue. Because you really can't solve the problem if there's no social justice. And I think that social cohesion is very, very important. And that's why we're where we are, the lack of social cohesion.
All right, Dr. Anyanwu. I like the fact that earlier you mentioned the aspect of widows, especially using the example of your own foundation, talking about the type of interventions that are necessary. But I'd like you to talk more about youth community outreach, maybe from your own foundation or the ones that you are partnering with, and how government can be involved. I would also like you to touch on a bit on the sort of roles that youth should be playing in national development at this time that things are generally tough. Tough not just in terms of humanitarian disasters here and there, but also in terms of cost of living, in terms of the sort of elections and governance systems that we are running, the sort of policies and reforms that we are pushing. What roles do you think that the youth of our nation should be gearing for, in order to be involved?
Okay, so basically from our work within the communities that we engage with, our emphasis is on widows and disadvantaged youths. So we recognize the fact that widows find it difficult to integrate with society because many of them are unskilled. Many of them in the rural areas are uneducated. So one of the things we do is to try to reach out to them. And reaching out to the average widow means that you need to extend that reach to their children. On average, the widows that we reach out to have 5 children. And not only that, their average age for the widow is no longer, let's say, 50-something or 60-something. It's actually about 25, 28, even lower. We have widows that are under 20 years and they already have 5 children, no education, no skill. And the outreaches that we've done, basically we do it, we reach out to them, we provide small scale funding, but before then we also engage in skilled training. Some of them are not yet trained, so they don't have a skill, and what they do is petty trade. Now, while we equip them financially in petty trade, that's a short-term measure. So we also look into the area of sponsoring their children in primary school and secondary school in the interim, so that whatever little funds they're given, they're able to deploy it in the business. Because the aim here is not that they want to get rich, they need a daily source of income. And when we're able to address that issue, what we also do in terms of education, because that can be expensive, we work in collaboration with community schools. And we try to pair them in groups. So if we have people from a certain community, we try to find a single school that it's low cost but offers a reasonable level of education. Again, because we're running with internally generated funds. And then we try to negotiate the tuition so that it's reduced, and then we have them schooled there. Now, the ideology behind it is that when they get to a certain level of education, they can now get into skilled training. When they get into skilled training and they're interested in going back to further their education, they will be able to work and school at the same time. But at least they will be independent to a certain level.
All right.
One other thing we do now in terms of the youths, one other thing we do in terms of the youths is our focus is not just on the average youth. We're actually looking at those in prisons, because one of the key issues is the ability to integrate back into society. Now, when they come out of the prisons and there's no place to fall to, and society, they feel rejected by society, the most logical thing for them to do is to go back into crime. Let's also not forget that some of them have been incarcerated, but they're not guilty, or they were not guilty. So what we do is we also try to run sensitization to sensitize them, and also to mentor them, counsel them, and also equip them with soft skills that will help them integrate back to society. So the basic things holds through. We're talking about youth development, we're talking about women advancement or empowerment. Is the basic thing. They need food, they need shelter, they need education, they need skilled training, and of course they need funding. So it just holds through every single time. So that's what we do. And then we will be very willing to partner with the government, because we already have grassroots penetration in Imo State. And we started with Mbise, Mbise in Mbise. So definitely collaboration with the government will enlarge our scope, and it will also give us deeper penetration in the markets.
All right, Dr. Anyanwu, thank you so very much. And you can be sure that we as an organization will always be willing in the sensitization aspect of the things that you do. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on the morning show today. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.